who is jumping in late will just be able to pick things up. So we'll just get the ball rolling. This is part 2. So thanks for joining us again. If this is your first time, then well, we forgive you for not being here last time, but that's okay. We'll just basically get going. I've introduced Stephen, our key speaker, last time. I won't bother doing too much red carpet rollout as much as he might appreciate it. We'll do a bit more of a a bit more of a dialogue format this time. So we'll have 2 people talking. Again, we'd love to see some engagement in the chat, Q&A around this topic of the catalyst for MSP growth, which we're deeming perfect flow, which is a big thing that we talk about in the agile Kanban space. We talked last time about strong teams. So if you were not at that one, certainly you'll want to get the recording for that, but we'll be jumping off from there. So I think, Steve, maybe you'll have a couple of points related to that we'll connect back to. Yeah, otherwise, without further ado, I guess we'll just move forward. I'll hand it over to you, Steve, and we can get going with the slides.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Stephen. Welcome back, everyone. And if you are new, if this is your first time in this series, welcome to you. Yeah, just to spend a couple of minutes, not too many minutes, but just a couple, referring back to what we talked about last time. And remember, the whole context is this idea of how do we grow as an MSP? Not just in terms of business growth, but keeping in mind that we want healthy cultures as well. And so we talked last time about this idea of strong teams and the importance of having a group of people that fit well together, that work well together, that are on the same page. And the main question that we asked at the very beginning of last time's webinar is this idea of wanting to being in a position where we're completing our work. It's one thing to have a lot of work coming into the pipeline and doing more work, but it's another thing to want to complete it. So we're going to kind of carry on with that theme. And in order for us to complete our work and be in that situation, we want to achieve what we're calling perfect flow. So we're going to kind of unpack what that looks like. And again, we do want some feedback from you. But before we get into that, so we're an MSP. We're a company that we're located in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia on the west coast of Canada. And so maybe you've heard of some of the crazy flooding that's going on in our region. So I just wanted to share with you just a couple of photos to give you some context. And for those of you that don't know what's been going on, so we've had some unseasonably, I would say, Stephen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, some unseasonably high amounts of rainfall combined with a very high water table in the region that we live and work, that's resulted in some pretty unprecedented flooding. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what that's looking like for us, so what you're seeing is the city of Abbotsford, where I live. We work in Abbotsford, Chilliwack, kind of that region. And all the water that you see in that photo should not be there. And so you can maybe get an idea of kind of what we're experiencing. This is taken by one of our colleagues from on the mountain where I live and where a lot of us live. And so looking down there, you can see kind of the devastation that people who live and work in the valley itself are experiencing. And here's another shot of the city of Abbotsford. And again, all that water that you see should not be there. So there is some extensive flooding going on. You can see the overpass on the highway and things like that. And so we are in a state of emergency, but fortunately we can work from home and carry on communicating with the good folks that are on this webinar. So anyway, that's just more of an update to give you an idea of what we're experiencing right now. So speaking of kind of perfect flow of water, I know, Stephen, that was terribly cheesy, but I thought it related a little bit, so I said it. So I want to start by asking a question and get your feedback, because this is kind of a driving question that we ask ourselves. Is work driving you, or are you driving your work? And so you get the feeling of this cartoony picture there of a person who's just overwhelmed by the stack of whatever it is that's on those papers. And so there are times, at least in our world, where we feel like the work is controlling our actions because there's a lot of it. And sometimes we lose sight of it. And therefore, we are almost a slave to our work. And so maybe just as you're thinking about that question, put your answer in your chat just to kind of get an idea of where you're at in your work life right now. So is work driving you? Or do you feel like you are in control of and driving your work? Where are you at this stage? And then Stephen, kind of let me know if people are contributing.
Yeah, a couple messages in there. Work's driving me. I think that's the resounding answer I hear from the MSP community.
Yeah.
Basically every answer that's come through the chat.
So I guess, I mean, that's sad in a way, but I mean, it's also positive because we're not alone. And so that's why one of the reasons that we want to provide this webinar is to be able to maybe start to address that issue. And so in answer to that question, we want to talk about this idea of perfect flow, because if our work is flowing in a perfect way, then maybe we feel like we are more in control of our work and less that the work is controlling us. And so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of flow. And I'm going to assume, forgive my ignorance, I'm going to assume though that you don't necessarily know the background or the meaning of the word flow to begin with. And so if you do, I apologize, but I'm just going to pretend that you don't. And so the idea of flow comes from, it's a term out of psychology, of the world of psychology. And flow is basically a state of consciousness where you become so fully absorbed in what you're doing to the exclusion of all other thoughts and emotions. So maybe you've experienced this where you get involved in a piece of work or a list that you have to do, and time flies and you've got very few other things that are encroaching on your focus, and you're able to zone in. So it's this idea of being able to focus as a component of flow. The other part of flow is where your body and mind are working together effortlessly. And there's a concept too that's important to flow, is that you're actually enjoying what you're doing. And that doesn't mean that you're bouncing off the walls and singing songs, but it's just the idea that you're content. So flow is about focus, but it's also about enjoying the work that you're doing. Here's another way to think about flow as a general concept: is it's when the ego falls away. And the ego, just another way of saying when your focus on yourself just kind of takes a back seat. So time flies, like I mentioned, every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one. Your whole being is involved and you're using your skills to the utmost. Maybe some of these things that I've just mentioned definitionally around the idea of flow, maybe you recognize those or you've experienced those, but that's another question that I'd love to hear your feedback on is, have you experienced flow? And it doesn't necessarily have to be just in your work life. It could be in your personal life. Have you experienced flow in the ways that I've just talked about? Go ahead and throw your answers into the chat. I'm really curious to see where people are coming from.
Yeah, it's coming through. Yes, but in previous non-IT work.
Okay. Yeah.
Very good qualifier.
Right. Yeah. Again, you're not alone. So let's get into talking about specifically in the MSP world, in the IT world, when we talk about flow of our work. I would love to spend a lot of time talking about how we can achieve flow just in our lives in general, but really we want the focus today to be on the flow of our work, ticket flows and related to client interaction and those types of things. So to start off, let's have a discussion about what is bad flow, because sometimes that's easier to identify, unfortunately, because we maybe experience bad flow more than we experience good or perfect flow. So maybe we can identify together some things that indicate what bad flow is. And so one of the things that is bad is our lead times are too long. And our lead times are the time from the moment your customer makes a request to the time they receive something. And that doesn't necessarily mean the work that is being done. That's cycle time. That's when your developers or your technicians actually do the work that the client has requested. Lead times are just before they get any kind of response at all. When those times get too long, when a customer is just sitting there waiting, even just to get an acknowledgement, that is the first indicator that flow is in a bad state. Lead times are too long. Feedback loops are too long. And as you know, feedback loops are just the amount of time communication takes to go from one point to the other, whether it's feedback between the client, your customer, and yourself, or between technicians, between leadership and technicians. But if those loops are too long, it's very, very easy for us to just completely lose sight of our work. And then we forget where our work is, who's doing it, what it is that we're supposed to be doing with our work. So that's a second way that flow can be bad. A third way that is indicative of bad flow is just simply too much work. And you might be kind of scratching your head a little bit because we're in the business of growth. And so how can we have too much work? You know, because there are some MSPs, some companies that are struggling to find work. You know, they want more clients. They want to hire salespeople to get more work in the door. But when we say too much work in the context of flow, it means too much work at the same time, or too much in the backlog. And we'll talk a bit more about backlog later on in this presentation, but too much work can be indicative of bad flow. And then another picture of bad flow is this idea of context switching. We use the language context switching very purposely instead of multitasking, because multitasking, according to us, really isn't a thing. It's not something that we talk about a lot, but the thing that does tend to trip us up is this idea of context switching, or these interruptions that break good flow or perfect flow. So we've all experienced probably that we've got a number of things going on at the same time, and how difficult it is to fully immerse yourself in one thing only to be interrupted and have your focus switch to another thing and have to start that process of refocusing all over again. That can be very frustrating and maddening to someone who is trying to get in a good state of flow. So those are four things. There are probably more, but those are the four main things from our perspective that are indicative of being in bad flow. And I'm not going to ask you to give feedback on this, but if you do want to, please do continue to put your thoughts and interactions in the chat. You're probably nodding and agreeing with a lot of the stuff that we've said so far. So if that's bad flow, let's move into a discussion of what good or perfect flow could look like. And so we wanted to start with just kind of a literal picture of flow, just to get your minds thinking along the lines. And so you can see this picture on the screen of the flow of traffic. And there's a lot of vehicles on the road here in this picture, but from what I can tell, things seem to be flowing well. So the picture of traffic flowing well is you can have a lot of cars, a lot of work, but it can still be flowing, and that can be a very positive thing. Another picture of that is just the river that you see here. On the side, on the banks of the river, you can see a lot of potential barriers to flow, but the river finds its way in between those barriers and still manages to keep that good flow going. And so hopefully these are two pictures, one that you've thought of already, but these are the things that we think about from just a visual standpoint when we think about what flow means. And so let's get onto how can we define what perfect flow is. And so what I want to do is offer just a couple of points to define what we're talking about when we think about perfect flow. The first thing is we have perfect flow when work spends a predictable amount of time in each stage of the work life cycle. And I highlight the word predictable because just because you might have a piece of work that is maybe 2 to 5 hours, I'm just picking a random amount of time, that on the surface might seem like it's in a certain stage for too long. That's okay as long as people know that it's in that stage for that amount of time. So that's why we highlight the word predictable, because as long as we're aware and as long as we can predict how much time a piece of work is going to spend at a particular stage, then that's okay, because then we're in control of our work as opposed to the work controlling us. So work spends a predictable amount of time in each stage of the work life cycle. The second definitional indication of perfect flow is that the entire team, so every role that you have on your team, understands the practices. And when we say understands the practices, what we're referring to is the documentation around how work should flow through your system. And so if everyone understands that there's going to be a minimum of, say, 1 business hour before a client is responded to after they make a request, then that is predictable and acceptable. Everyone understands that as a general rule. But if not everybody understands that, and one person takes 2 hours to respond to a ticket that's submitted by a customer, then that's going to really break down a lot of other things, isn't it? And so the entire team needs to understand the practices that you have set up around good workflow and perfect flow in your work. And so if we can wrap our heads around those two things that we just mentioned, we're well on our way to achieving perfect flow in our work. So our predictability around that, and then the understanding of everyone on the team. So let's get into now some other just preliminary thoughts around this idea of perfect flow. And there are several here to discuss. And now's the time that Stephen is going to probably jump in here and we'll tag team on some of these thoughts here because of the work that he's doing with many of you on this call in terms of the tool itself. So
do you mind if I jump in just quickly on the last slide for 1 sec?
What's that, my man?
Do you mind if I just jump in on the last slide for 1 sec?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, so just one thing to qualify with predictable, I'm sure a lot of people I've talked to have predictable doesn't necessarily mean it's in the same bad state consistently. Like I had some people who are talking about, oh, we always take 6 to 8 hours to get first responses on these tickets, or those tickets sit in waiting on customer for 2 weeks. Just because that's a really bad number and predictable, that doesn't necessarily mean perfect flow either. There is an implication that this is a good predictable amount of time, not a terrible consistent number, but a good consistent number.
Yeah, it's a great distinction, Stephen. Thank you. Yeah, predicting
it's
horror.
Implied.
Predicting horror is not a good place to be.
Hopefully nobody's there today.
No. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so one of the thoughts around perfect flow is this idea of getting the team to a place where we're solving operational problems. And when we say operational problems, we're not necessarily talking about the problems that our clients or our customers are having, but we're talking about the operational problems on how we do our work. And this could mean, like, how do we visualize our work? What documentation exists around the policies and procedures around who does what, and What systems do we use to solve our customers' problems? And so if we're not clear on those operational things that we use to govern our work, then chances are our flow is going to be in a bad state. The second thing to think about when we talk about flow is this idea of waste and eliminating waste. And so waste in an MSP concept is like waiting, work that is waiting on someone to touch it and respond, whether it's you're waiting on a client response after you've reached out to him or her, you're waiting on a different member of the team to do something on the list of things that needs to be done. Over planning is another concept when we talk about eliminating waste. And Stephen, this was a thing that you added to this. Talk about over planning a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to put this in the context of two of the main groups of people that we have, like project teams and service teams. So the over planning side is something that we see a lot in the project space well, the idea is a Gantt chart or a waterfall project where every single thing needs a timeline and a due date, and you're planning out all of your projects entirely at the beginning. And I mean, the more projects you have, the more of a nightmare that becomes. But the further out you plan, the less likely you are going to have those estimates plan out or happen as you actually plan them. So this sense of planning all these things that you then have to replan is certainly a wasted effort there. And in the smaller context, it's easier to see that with the service teams when I know we're a ConnectWise Manage MSP ourselves. I know we work with Autotask and other MSPs out there, but ConnectWise pitches this sort of best practice of painting your calendar green and putting every single ticket into a time block. And while there is structure to that, you're still doing the same kind of over planning where every single ticket is being estimated and scheduled into a calendar. And everybody knows that it doesn't really pan out quite like you draw it in the calendar, even a couple of days out.
Yeah, good. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Just moving along here, another thing that we talk about when we're trying to strive for this idea of perfect flow is this idea of working one ticket at a time. And you might be kind of smirking or even laughing out loud at the ideal nature of that statement. But really, we do fight for this. We see the importance of our inability as people to multitask. And we talked a little bit earlier about the pain of context switching. This is what we strive for: is we're focusing on one ticket at a time. And in a imperfect world, we're going to have a number of different tickets in the same status. What we strive to do is if we work on one ticket and we get interrupted or distracted by something else, ideally what we want to do is we want to put that ticket into a different status. Whether if it's in progress and we get interrupted and we stop working on it, we change the status to get it out of in progress so that we can bring that other thing that we got interrupted with into in progress. Because really, it's very, very difficult and flow is diminished when we have a number of tickets in the same status. So that's the importance of trying to strive to work on one ticket at a time.
Yeah, I think that's a big struggle for service teams, especially because if you're answering the phones, which we can't really dive into that side of the process today, but if you're answering the phone, you can't immediately switch that ticket over. So, maybe one extra piece can pile up, but one bad step and then a second bad step, and all of a sudden you've got 17 in progress tickets, but that doesn't reflect what the tickets are actually doing.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing that we encourage you to think about is when we're solving problems that come up, because we have so much work on the go at the same time, and because generally we're in a hurry also to get our work done, we tend to put band-aid solutions onto problems without really solving the root of it. And one of the really good ways to solve the root of a problem is to ask good why questions. And so instead of just like I said, putting a Band-Aid on a problem and moving on without having solved it. Just pause, take a breath, and go, why is that customer unhappy? Why did it take so long for us to complete this assigned task? Why do we have too much work in a status? Because if we can get really good at asking those why questions, it's going to get us closer to solving the root issue of a problem. So you can probably, if we gave you 5 or 7 minutes right now, you could probably come up with some really good why questions for your own context. We're not going to do that now, but we encourage you to go through that exercise on your own to really try to identify the root cause of some of the problems that you might be experiencing.
Yeah, we've got a comment in the chat there from Candace, and sorry about the +1 there. She's talking about the 5 whys and just a why, and then diving deeper, like why is, you know, the root of that actual issue rather than just the surface symptom or the thing that you see.
Yeah, perfect, Candace. Yeah, it's an amazing comment. Yeah, you're exactly right. Just a couple of other preliminary thoughts here before we get even more granular and more detailed on this idea of achieving perfect flow is, in addition to doing some of the other things that we've been talking about. Sorry, I'll just back up a little bit. And so these are things that we can choose to do. Like we can identify some of those operational problems that we have, and we can take steps to solve those. We can identify specific things that we would call waste, and we can take steps to eliminate those things. But really, what we also want to encourage you to think about, what is the ideal mindset to bring to this idea of perfect flow and solving some of those problems that we talked about. And so just 2 of the mindsets that we encourage you to adopt that work really well for us is understand value from the customer's perspective. One of the things that I know I experience with different tech teams is we think we have the right answer that the customer really wants, but it doesn't mean that that's what the customer has identified that he or she wants. And so if we can really, as empathetically as we can, put ourselves in the customer's shoes and understand what is valuable to them, then we can get a lot closer to doing the work that is really needed and getting to this idea of perfect flow. So as an example of understanding value from the customer's perspective, yeah, you might have 5 different things on the go at the same time, and then you get a customer's request coming into that workflow. Your customer doesn't care about those 5 things that you have going on over here. According to them, they're the only people that are walking the earth. And so they want their need met, and they want it met right now. And so, wow, this should only take you 10 minutes. Like, why can't you just simply solve my problem? It doesn't mean that you have to abandon all of those 5 things that you're doing to solve their one problem in the moment. But if you understand that that's their perspective, for example, you can manage that expectation and communicate with them and say, hey, how urgent is this? Not that you care, but I've got 5 other things. I'm not saying that this is the script you need to follow, but there's a lot going on right now. Are you okay if we get at this tomorrow? Or is this urgent and needs to be done ASAP? So you're helping yourself by understanding where you're at in your workflow, but you're also helping the customer to understand the value that they put on the work that they've asked you to do. So that's a mindset. Mm-hmm. The other mindset to adopt is this idea of no one working in isolation. If you're like me or others, you're in a good place when you're able to understand the work that you have to do for a day, and you're left alone to do it with little interruption. That can be very good and healthy, but it might break down good flow because you need a team of people that we talked about last time. You need a good team of people that are able to collaborate and communicate really effectively. And especially if there are a number of different technicians that are touching one ticket and needing to work together to complete the tasks of that ticket, you can't have a situation where people are working in isolation, because that's when those feedback loops start to get too long, that's when things start to break down in terms of time it takes to complete something. It also increases the risk of doubling up on work, where you have two people doing the same thing and not knowing about it because they haven't talked because they're too isolated. So that's a mindset to pay attention to, is to make sure that no one is working in a silo.
Yeah, and I'll just plug in the Strong Teams webinar from last week has a lot of context related to this. Like no man is an island, definitely focusing on the group effort of delivering the group of work, not just one person delivering one thing.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. You bet. Okay, now we're going to move into what are some very specific steps that you can take to achieve perfect flow. We've given you some thoughts. We've given you some things to consider and some questions to ask, but now are there things, is there a recipe? Is there a formula that you can follow to achieve perfect flow? And so this is where Stephen is going to start taking over here and talk through a model that TopLeft has to help ourselves, our own MSP, but also our clients to achieve this idea of perfect flow. So fire away now, Stephen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly, this is a question I get asked a lot, which is kind of how do you recommend people have perfect flow? How do you achieve that with your team? How do you map this out in TopLeft, which is the tool that we provide? And we've broken things down into 4 main steps to guide people from not doing this to doing it in a more iterative way. So yeah, if you want to just put the first bullet point on the screen, number 1 key, you'll hear this with Kanban boards and agile literature. It starts with visualizing what you're actually doing today. Mapping out the process stages and creating a visual way to demonstrate that. And this is something that, this is there's sticky notes on a whiteboard watching the work move from start to finish. This is different than a table or a spreadsheet or your service board or your queue list that you have in your PSA. That does give you some of the data, but it doesn't tell you how things are moving. Each individual work item is just way too detailed. So visualizing what you do today so that you can understand what's actually happening. And again, Steve mentioned feedback loops, just this constant way of getting feedback on what is the system doing currently? Is that working? Where are the problems? And having that feedback into your team's decision making. Then we can jump over to number 2. Really, this is a lot of what we're talking about yesterday and today as well, is engaging the team, not just the individual, explaining this process of how you want tickets, projects, whatever kind of work is going through your team, explaining how that is supposed to flow. What are those stages? How do you want that to work? And then reviewing it. Certainly, we'd strongly recommend a daily huddle or a scrum. Some people call stand-up meetings. A daily point, 5-10 minutes, just a quick thing for everybody to touch base so that everybody knows whose work is whose, what's falling behind, what needs to be redistributed, that everybody has a clear path forward. So especially for the service managers, project managers that are responsible for this kind of delivery, that gives you a really quick point of contact every single day so that you don't have things falling behind for days at a time. This is that quick feedback loop, is that daily huddle there. Yeah, and number 3 is more towards documentation and definition. You need to understand what good is. What is good versus bad? We've talked about bad flow versus perfect flow. You probably have some ideas in your head. It's really important to communicate that with your team and have that agreed upon. What does a neglected or stale ticket look like? Is it that hasn't had a first response in so many hours? Is it that it's been sitting in progress for a day or 2? That might look different between service and project teams, but the important thing is that you do have an understanding of what that good and bad threshold is. WIP, WIP, you'll hear us talk about that a lot. Work in progress is key to this, because the number of things you have that are quote unquote in progress, sort of started but not finished, the more you have there, the more problems you're going to have when that Sev1 server down issue pops up and bumps everything else further down the list. Really, it's about delivering that value, as we were talking about on the earlier slide. The customer wants the value at the end. And so the more things that you've half done but haven't delivered value, that's not beneficial for the customer. And again, just communicating and documenting that, whether you use a centralized documentation solution, a wiki. I know some people are using IT Glue for different things related to the documentation process. There are a lot of different tools out there. And then the last piece is really a continuous improvement cycle. And this is a key thing in agile literature, Scrum, Kanban, and a lot of other methods, where you have regular cycles of revisiting this problem of how do we achieve perfect flow? What is the state of things currently? And we've just put a couple of bullet points there to really identify. I mean, we've already defined what is good. We can identify KPIs, or are we meeting our SLAs, or what is that key, the metrics that you're looking at? What one do we want to improve because we see some things falling behind? Do an experiment, make a change, whether it's assigning a different resource or changing a way you handle certain work, and then review that at the end of that cycle. We're talking 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks at a time, and maybe rolling this into your team's weekly meeting, so that you have a regular cycle where the team is engaging in this process of looking at the work and trying out trying out something different to see how you can improve that flow. Really, it comes down to how can we improve, asking that question, diving deeper into the whys, and then making a change and seeing what happens. So those are the 4 main steps that we're breaking down from start to finish: is visualizing, including your team, setting clear definitions of good versus bad, and then having this cycle at the end that you can have a review period that the team is engaged in. And so from this, we'd love to have questions about those points. And yeah, thanks for going to the next slide, Steve. Some of you, I know, I can recognize a few names in the list already. You are TopLeft users, so you're familiar with what a Kanban board is and how that can impact your team. We did want to talk a little bit about that so that we have a visual example to work from here. Happy to have any kinds of Q&A and chat come through. But just taking a look at this board, we can have a couple of examples with what we've been talking about throughout this webinar. So one of the things, just to explain what we're looking at, each of these rows, these swim lanes, are a resource on, in this case, a service team. We're looking at a service desk, and this is more of a dispatcher-oriented view, so we can see person by person, what are they working on. And the work should flow from left to right, from brand new to completed, value delivered. And we can see things like our first row there, Terry Adams, that started or in progress column. We see that there's a nice green 1 there. That's good. He's only got 1 in progress ticket. Maybe it's got some red flags there because we've set some boundaries on what's good and bad, but he's only got a stack up of 1, whereas that other person down there has a whole bunch of things piling up. So we flag that as a problem, and we can see that immediately. And Terry knows that there's just 1 thing there. It's really easy to figure out which one of these 1 things to work on. It's that one, and then he moves it over to completed and moves his way back through these columns, picking up the next top item in that list. We talked earlier as well about predictability, and the queued column was mentioned. Here I've called that triaged or ready. So that second column there, where we have work that is ready to go. Maybe that dispatcher has set up the type and the subtype. They've set the expectations with your client. There's an assignment that's been made, and it's in that pile ready to go. But understanding how long or how many tickets pile up in that column is an important thing to look at. So when you're visualizing this, you can immediately see those numbers, and you can understand where the problems are based on, is there a bottleneck where we're having a lot of things pile up? Are they waiting there for a long time? Is there a particular person who doesn't necessarily understand this process? These are all different kinds of questions we can ask, but the important thing is that we're visualizing and that we're engaging the whole team. This isn't just one manager breathing down everybody's necks and trying to force this into action. So this is an example from our tool from TopLeft. And again, some of you are users. Some of you, this might be a newer concept. I'd be happy to dive deeper into this if there's any confusion. I don't think I see any questions in the chat right now. So maybe everybody is pretty familiar with this or has been looking through our website at least enough to get on this webinar. So we're glad to have you. Yeah, there's one other thing I was going to mention there. Really, these stages, one thing that might be a disconnect for people, these columns that we have, these stages in the work, there's only 5 or 6 of these, and in your PSA, you might have 20 or 30 different statuses. You might be breaking this up by different boards or queues. That's useful to differentiate, waiting on customer response versus waiting on parts to be shipped. But we're grouping those into a common stage here, which is the waiting column. So you can have several different statuses. By all means, that can be useful. But then group that into one common stage, and you can understand 7 tickets that are waiting on some third party, rather than looking at a giant table of waiting customer, waiting parts, blocked for some indeterminate reason, waiting manager approval, whatever your statuses are. Everybody's going to look a little bit different. So hopefully this baseline resonates with people. If not, definitely chat me up in the comments down there, and we can have a bit more dialogue about that. Anything you think I've missed there, Steve, or is that I guess for you as well? Obviously, I'm in TopLeft all the day, all the time. So if anything pops out to you, I'd be happy to dive deeper into that.
Yeah, barring any questions or discussion points from participants, the thing that stands out for me is the process that you're talking about, Stephen, the flow that you've demonstrated here with the tool. The tool can only provide so much, but we wanted to lead this webinar series with a discussion about people and strong teams, because none of this stuff works if you don't have a good team of people in place that are working well together to achieve this stuff. And so I would encourage you, like Stephen has said, if you have questions about the tool or about the flow and the different definitions that we've talked about today, definitely continue to reach out to Stephen or anyone on the TopLeft team. But we're also here to help with the people part. And so if you're struggling with or wondering how to bring the right people onto the team, or to take the team that you have and take them to the next level, we are here to help with that as well. And so please don't hesitate to reach out to Stephen with those questions too, because it's all part of the same process. The tool is only as good as the team that's using it. So that's the only thing that I would want to kind of capstone this with, Stephen.
Sure. Yeah, and we did have one question down there specifically about how to engage the team to use this kind of a tool. There are a lot of different ways to approach that question. Some of it depends on what kinds of problems you're having as a team or what kinds of goals you're trying to set. From a broad sense, and hopefully I'm not being too vague here, but it's in terms of understanding that these are the questions that you're trying to help your team answer. Is what are you working on now? What is the first priority? Is the data in your PSA actually accurate? You can immediately see that in a visual board. And we have teams that turn on TopLeft, and in the first week, their engineers go, "Oh yeah, I left that one and I forgot to put my time entry there," or "Oh yeah, I didn't move this status, or it's in the wrong thing." To bring people into this as a homepage or a dashboard makes these problems and the ability to quickly update them immediately accessible for them. It minimizes the number of times you have to click around in different menus to get this same data output. It puts it on one page, it syncs it back into the PSA, which should be time savings for them. Like, everybody's trying to get more tickets done, put in more billable hours, spend less time doing the admin. So if the engineers are having any kind of friction or frustration or challenge in the PSA, some of them it's obvious because they have a pile of in-progress tickets, and that's a really key point to focus on. Some of them it's engineers will just do things the same way they've been doing them because they're familiar with the tool. That doesn't mean it's the best way. That doesn't mean it's the most efficient way. And that's why this culture of continuous improvement, asking the why questions, examining your metrics and seeing where you could improve them is a team discussion process. And that's why we really encourage daily huddles and weekly team meetings as key pivot points for introducing these kinds of concepts to your team. It has to be a manager and engineer engagement. they have to feel like they have ownership of this process. They're not just being told, do it this way, or I'm gonna, it'll pile up in the red, and then we'll highlight you and shame you in the meetings, or not this manager down, sort of breathing down people's necks. Engineers don't want that. They're technical, they're smart, they want to get the job done, they want to spend more time working with the tech and less dealing with the timekeeping and the admin and the tedious things that really slow us down.
One thing I would add to that, Stephen, in answer to the question about how to engage the team is, we mentioned this a little bit earlier today about the mindset and the importance of having the right mindset around this stuff. Just a story from our own MSP. When we first started using the tool, TopLeft, it took a long time for people to actually start looking and working out of the tool. It was hard because people were used to just organizing their life and their work life out of ConnectWise. But really, using TopLeft, you don't need to be in ConnectWise at all. And so to get your team to engage using the tool and understanding the flow that provides is going to be very helpful. But that takes a long time to change a habit, as we all know. And so just coming up with daily things that you can do with your team to get them in the mindset of using the tool in the way that it's been designed to use.
Yeah, and there's another comment about just being busy, engineers being busy or being frustrated with this new thing, this change. Depending on your team, some teams are big enough to have two different service teams, or service versus project. If you're one of those people, I'd encourage some kind of an A/B test. Make it a bit of a challenge. Have one team use TopLeft and see how that impact changes. Make sure they're at least daily, they're checking this to understand their priorities and where the red flags are and where work is piling up, as opposed to a team that doesn't. Certainly, you should be seeing the ROI. You should be seeing the engineers spending less time per ticket or more billable hours plugged in. They should be less bogged down by that pile of in progress work. Those things should see positive changes in, hopefully even in a couple of weeks, but it is certainly an iterative process. Like, we've been doing this in our team for 4 or 5 years. We're still changing our boards and our PSA configuration. We still don't have perfect green across every board all the time. There's not like a you're done. It's a again, that continuous iteration cycle where every single week or two you're taking a step in the right direction. You're seeing those KPIs and metrics improve. Your customers are happier. You're ultimately delivering that value. So yeah, basically I'd say prove the concept, test it out.
And change for anyone is hard. Change in any kind is hard. And so when you have a group of people who are used to doing things a certain way, and you're introducing something that you can sell them on the benefits of workflow in this way, but you're still asking them to lose control of what they have been known to do for a number of years. And so that's just, it's hard. You're going to be fighting human nature, and human nature deplores change. The reality, though, is that this tool, from my experience, makes work life easier. And so the comment that yes, engineers, technicians are busy, using this tool in the way that it's designed will make them less busy, or at least feel less busy, because you'll be able to add more work into the system, but getting the flow that they're after is going to change their life significantly. Did another comment pop into the chat?
Yeah, just that people problems are a tough one to try and change.
Yes.
Yeah, I know Steve and I talked about this before the first webinar, being strong teams. There isn't a strong teams, like people management is not a one and done webinar and here's the 4 steps to perfect teams. And that's why we didn't present a webinar that way. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a follow these 4 steps and you're golden. Certainly a lot bigger, multifaceted issue. And so yeah, one step at a time. We'd be happy to dialogue more around that, though.
We could probably wind it down here, Stephen. We want to respect people's time, and we could probably move to the next slides here, Stephen, and you can take us through what's next.
Sure, yeah, and especially for people who are interested in TopLeft and in these process changes and engaging your team in this process. We do have a program that is designed to both teach you the basics of the tool and the methodology, as well as engage people in discussion around that. And that's this completed ticket challenge. So if you can pop up, yeah, a couple of the bullet points there. This is a 3-week sort of boot camp course. It's more intensive training. We prioritize the finishing work over starting work to smooth out that flow. We're sending daily guides. So 4 times a week, we're dropping some email and video tips in your inbox so that you have specific things you can do. And we're also including a weekly community call. This is a group program. It's not a one-person thing. It's designed that other MSPs that are in this program can dialogue with each other with what's working and what's not, and where the friction points are in your own personal team, to really dialogue around the solutions. And again, we posted this quote last week, but really it's something that existing longtime customers have wished that was around when they first got started. It's a much better position to begin. Certainly some teams are very self-sufficient and can figure out a lot of things on their own, or already know all the things we could possibly talk about. Most teams aren't there yet. So we'd be happy to dialogue with you, have one of our trainers guide you through that. Yeah, normally this is a $199 US cost, but for anybody who's signing up with an annual plan by the end of November here, I know that's coming up with US Thanksgiving and a lot of people are getting busier, but definitely reach out to me. We'll provide that as a free offering along with any annual subscription on the standard plan. So if you're interested in that program, you're interested in TopLeft, maybe you just weren't sure how to get started, this is a great way to do that even longtime customers have been very happy to be part of. So yeah, engage with me. We'll send a couple of links in the email follow-up. You don't have to memorize these links. I guess you can't really click on the webinar screen like Steve can in his PowerPoint. Yeah, definitely engage with us around that, and I'd be happy to talk more.
One of the things as we wrap up here, Stephen, I would love for those of you that are participating, first of all, thank you very much for being here. This is the first time that we've done a webinar like this. If you may have been a part of Stephen's or Matt Fox's presentations on the tool itself, but we really appreciate your engagement on this, and we'd love to get some feedback. I'd love to know kind of what your key takeaways are. If you were here for last time and this time, maybe just throw some things in the chat, pop some things in the chat, and just give us some indication of what you're taking away. This would be helpful for us just as we plan more of these to know what stands out and what's been useful. So if you can just kind of pop some stuff in there, I'd love to get some of that feedback.
Yeah, there's Candace, who's been a huge contributor in the chat today. Thanks for that, Candace. She's saying, yeah, she's really enjoyed these 2 webinars. Definitely the ideas around strong teams were a big deal. Yeah, Mike is saying, thank you for the great content and the inspiration. Yeah, Mike, you had a TopLeft specific question around the business case there. I'd encourage you to go to our website. We have a contact form. We also have a get a demo button that'll go right into my calendar. I'd be happy to talk specifically about what your team is dealing with, you know, what kinds of problems or what context. The business case is a great question, but it's often a lot more of an individual one. So I'd be glad to follow up with you there. Yeah, Angie has a really good point. It's nice to be reminded that the changes don't happen overnight and it takes time to implement.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, thanks everyone for that great feedback. If there are things that you think about outside of this webinar, please don't hesitate. Send us an email. Let us know kind of what you're thinking, what you're passionate about, and we're here to help you in any way that we can. And so again, I just really appreciate your engagement. Are there other comments that you want to raise there, Stephen?
Yeah, just a couple of resources if people want to dive deeper, both from our own team. TopLeft, I know Steve mentioned Matt Fox, our VP. He's done a couple of webinars focused on specific service and project contexts. If you go to YouTube and search for TopLeft, our channel has those webinars and a lot of other videos to help around those topics. And if you email us, I'll be glad to send you the direct links. The other thing is it's required reading in all of the group of companies that we're a part of is the Phoenix Project. If you have not read that, we strongly encourage it. It is a fantastic read, sort of a business fable where they're storyizing some of these lean and agile concepts and team issues. Yeah, there's a couple of people who have read it. I'm sure anybody who has remembers the name Brent. We've unfortunately got a Brent on our team who isn't that kind of choke point bottleneck person, but yeah, it's a very, very vivid imagery. Yeah, Candace says theirs is got a different name, not Brent in their team. Perfect. Thanks everybody for attending. And yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback around this. If you want to send us an email with some more detailed notes or book a call, I'd be happy to talk more specifically about your business and how we can use this to impact you.
Thanks, everybody.